Welcome back, beautiful people. We are here to discuss yet another colorful story. Tonight, we have a special guest. As you can see, he's knocked out sleeping. Somebody is teething, but he's going to be a part of tonight's story. Of course, you know that we are all in the house because of the Rona, so there may be some things you may hear in the background because we are real people. So tonight's story is going to be about patty rollers and the history of the police. So the police got their start at around 1704 in South Carolina, right? And their sole purpose for being created was to organize, while armed, to police black people. And so their goal was to make sure that they were constantly in order. They were supposed to arrest them if they ran away and then bring them back to the plantation. They were supposed to make sure that they were never gathering in large groups. And so these patty rollers not only had the job just making sure that black people stayed in line or were kept in check, they were supposed to be order keepers, but they were only protecting the property of the enslavers. So what that looked like, you had those patrols, which is what the police do today. They patrol certain areas where they know that black people would congregate or would be known for trying to escape through, right? So I know people like to reference Kunta Kinte from Roots, getting his foot chopped off and running away. It wasn't just enslavers' role to do that to enslaved Africans. It was also the role of patty rollers or police officers or slave patrollers. So they were popular in southern states during the colonial periods, but they were not uncommon to the north either. They would have the authority mandated by the state and local government to cause harm to enslaved Africans, and sometimes it would be freed people of color. So if they seemed like they didn't belong in the neighborhood or if they looked suspicious, patty rollers would be paid to keep these people in order or harm them. This was legal, mandated by our own governments to do this to people. So it wasn't always just the English and the Spanish who had the most wealth and the most opportunities who were doing this. No, these jobs were also afforded to poor whites who needed jobs. And so when the wealthier, privileged whites in the colonial period had the money and they wanted their assets protected, they would hire these people to do this. The patty rollers from 1704 to about 1860s, till the early 1860s, around 1865, they realized that they could no longer do this to people because of the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, everybody had an issue with black people trying to be equal and wanting equity and wanting reparations, that they were promised their 40 acres and a mule. But, well, the U.S. has a tendency to not keep their promises, right? So what ended up happening was the patty rollers now needed jobs because it was now illegal to persecute enslaved Africans based off of their heritage, right? But now colonizers were upset. They were fearful. They were a bit irrational. They thought that now that enslaved Africans were free, that they lacked all decency and that they would have to endure the same repercussions that they inflicted upon enslaved Africans. Insert in the 1860s, the Ku Klux Klan. I can't even say that right. It's just terrible. But the KKK, them people. So from about 1865 to about 1877, the KKK took the historical ways of the patty rollers and used that to enforce policing in the South. But it wasn't just policing. They actually tormented free black people now because they really believed that they didn't deserve freedom. Black people are 21% more likely to get stopped by the police or being persecuted by our government for doing the exact same crimes as a white person. Back then, it wasn't even considered a crime, and they were persecuted. And when I mean persecuted, I mean hung, burned alive, and then hung, raped, brutalized, you name it. The KKK had free range to do whatever they wanted, and they masked it under being the police. Insert the Civil Rights Act, and there's supposed to be freedoms that supposed to be afforded to black people now so that we wouldn't be targeted. But it evolved, kind of like the patty roller's job had evolved into the KKK, and the KKK had evolved into the police. Now it's politicians who are responsible for lawmaking. So you have the war on drugs with Ronald Reagan. You have, I don't like that man. You have the era of Nixon. You have the crime bill with with Joe Biden. You have stop and frisk. You have so many things that are being put into place that target black people that is rooted in historical policing in the United States of America. So why is this important? It's important to know the history of the way things have been organized to get to where we are now. Black people are not protesting in the streets because we're bored. We're telling you for centuries, our people have been targeted in this country for asinine reasons. It makes no sense why we cannot get justice. Carolyn Bryant accused Emmett Till of harming her. He was beaten to death. And then later on, almost 60 years later, she admitted she lied. The Karens and the Kevins and all the rest of them, this is not new. This is historical racism, and it is deeply rooted in our country. And for some reason, we can't seem to reconcile that idea that patty rollers are the root of our issues, and they're an evolution of the police. And the police have only evolved with stronger weapons, and there's video cameras capturing their assaults on our bodies, showing that we are innocent, and we're still having to prove our humanity. Like the instance with Breonna Taylor, it's been almost 6 months and no one has been arrested, even after the police officers lied about what happened to her. There's never been any repercussions for the way that police have treated black bodies in this country. And knowing the history of police is important because at least we know why they've been doing this. Now we have a reason to make sure that true justice gets served. Defunding the police may be a way. No one said abolish. Defunding and moving those resources to other aspects that help our community, because the suburbs have all the resources and don't need to be overly policed. They don't have the issues that most inner city communities or heavily black populated cities have, because they're not being forced out of their resources. Demanding justice from the people where our taxes come from to pay their salaries is our right. And I believe that it's time that we reconcile with this. Thank you so much for stopping by for our colorful story. I hope to see you next time. And this is a message to Kentucky. You need to arrest the officers who murdered Breonna Taylor. Have a good night.